So, we'll go ahead and begin. So I'm very pleased to introduce Cheryl Roberts. She's Executive Director of the Greenberger Center for Social and Criminal Justice, which is operating or going to operate a secure residential in New York City. We'll learn about Hope House, the issues, the vision, the challenges that she's had over the past 10 years. I thought it was only 6, but it's been 10. And she'll talk about what Hope House is. Cheryl is, like I said, the executive director. She's also a part-time city court judge in Hudson, New York, the first woman appointed to that role, where she presides over misdemeanor mental health court. Prior to appointment as a judge, Ms. Roberts had the privilege of serving 4 mayors as the city attorney in Hudson, New York, 8 years as a town judge in Columbia County, New York, in addition to being a licensed bond agent for nonprofit bail fund. Early in her career, she practiced environmental and land use law, served as counsel to committees in both the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. So Cheryl comes with a lot of experience and a lot of political background. And even then, it was difficult.
Yes.
So welcome.
Thank you, Lori. I so appreciate being invited and appreciate the work that you and Chuck do. And I'm sure all the people on this phone call.
Yeah.
It really is, remarkable how much you've accomplished. And I commend you for it. And I did mention you in an op-ed that I had recently published in the New York Daily News about Hope House is groundbreaking. So I really did mean it when I said that Hope House stands on the shoulders of parents and loved ones, like you, because it didn't come from nowhere. So Hope House comes from, the experience that a parent, Francis Greenberger, had with his son in the mental health and criminal justice systems. About 12, 13 years ago, his oldest son was incarcerated. He robbed services from a cab. His father was very wealthy, but he didn't have money in his pocket that day. So Morgan decided to rob, a cab of services. He was out on bail, and he also has a substance use disorder. He became convinced that a drug dealer was after him. So he ran to his apartment, called the police. The police came. They found that there was no drug dealer after Morgan. But they, nevertheless, when they came in the door, they handcuffed his African-American caregiver and her friend, thinking they were the drug dealers. So they left, they unhandcuffed the caregivers, who were obviously upset. Morgan was still upstairs upset. So he started a small fire on his stove, watched it burn, and called the fire department, reasoning that if the police couldn't help him, the firemen could. Well, when the firemen came and the police came, they arrested him for arson. And because he knew there were people downstairs, his caregivers, it was a felony. And so, with a felony level arson charge, the DA at the time, Cyrus Vance, and the judge were not willing to divert him except to what they called a secure facility. They sent Francis on this wild goose chase and found out, well, there was no such thing as what they wanted, which was something that was secure. They didn't want Morgan going to a treatment facility because everyone knew he had mental illness. They didn't want him going to a treatment facility and then leaving and then hurting someone.
Yeah.
And the issue there is that when someone, as I know the judge here, Judge McDougall, right? You know this, when you have come before a judge and you do something, in this case, that the judge, instructs you not to do, like going to a treatment facility, the service provider would have to go back to the judge and say, Judge, Morgan left. Can you issue a bench warrant? The judge can do that. It takes time. And then in New York City, the police have a lot of things to do besides pick up Morgan Greenberger if he should leave a treatment facility. So the concern from the judge and the DA were, even if we send Morgan to these facilities that are not totally secure or not secure at all, that Morgan would go, leave, and then it would take days, months, to pick up Morgan, and he might hurt someone. So the long story short of that is Morgan ended up going to prison. He spent 2.5 years at Rikers and another couple of years upstate. As a consequence, Francis and I started the Greenberger Center And we wanted to develop a kind of therapeutic alternative to incarceration that judges and DAs would feel comfortable with. We wanted it to be fully secure, but we ran afoul of some Medicaid rules, which I can tell you about in a moment. So we had to modify the program and make it kind of as secure as we could without ringing the Medicaid bill, the Medicaid provision that basically says, if you are incarcerated, you can't get Medicaid. But what happened in 2016 is that rule was expanded to say, even if you're in a private facility like Hope House and you can't freely come and go, we're going to deny you Medicaid benefits as well. So we had to create a facility where a person with those charges, serious mental illness and a felony level crime, could be diverted to a residential treatment facility rather than go to prison, and have it as secure as possible to give judges and DAs the comfort they needed to agree to divert someone. And so what we were able to work on for 10 years with OMH is the Office of Mental Health. It's a program whereby if someone meets those criteria, felony, serious mental illness, they have to be competent to understand what's happening. They have to voluntarily agree to go to Hope House rather than prison. They then enter into a plea agreement with the judge, and the judge says, okay, Morgan, you have to go to Hope House. You have to apply, abide by the rules. And if you do that, if you plead guilty to whatever charge and agree to do this, we will then withhold the sentencing. We'll wait on the sentencing until you complete the treatment. If you complete, we will have the prosecutor withdraw the charge, and then we will have you plead to a lower charge, and you'll be sentenced to a term that does not include incarceration. So there's a real incentive there for them to do it. But they have to, go and also get valuable treatment. So Hope House on Crotona Park would provide people residential care 24 hours a day, security 24 hours a day. They would be also able to go to a treatment clinic. In New York, it's called a continuing day treatment program, CDTP. And it's going to be located right in the building, which is really unique. I don't think anybody else in New York has been able to do that. So they will not have to come and go. They can go right into the second floor. They can get their treatment 4 hours a day in the treatment clinic. They will then go to the residential side or go back to the residential side and be engaged in programming like making dinner, learning kitchen skills, doing gardening skills, doing computers. We hope to have meditation and yoga, a holistic wraparound approach. Our residential treatment model will be based on what's called a work order day. And that's based on the clubhouse model that Fountain House, has pioneered, so that, a work order day means lunch doesn't get on the table unless everybody in the community helps. The house doesn't get clean unless everyone helps. So it's a real community effort to get real things done. We'll also be working on a modified therapeutic community model where, again, people are responsible to each other. There's some rules about Hope House. There can be no violence, no threats of violence. If that happens, they go back to court and it's up to the judge. But that is the one thing that, we would have to tell the judge, we can't have someone who threatens violence because that's antithetical to the therapeutic, process. They also, for the first 6 months, need to stay on site and can only go off site with a peer. And hopefully that'll be enough time. If not, we'll have to negotiate that with the judge. It's not totally hard locked doors in that, by that I mean, the doors are locked, but they will be on delay. So there's 2 ways to get out because of fire emergency. There's the front door. You have to go past the security guard. So that's not going to happen very easily if you want to leave without, telling anyone. The other way we have the doors, the exit in Hope House is a series of 3 doors down a hallway. They'll open up during a fire. You can get right out. Otherwise, they are hard locked. But if you push them and the emergency alarm goes off, they open up, but they're each on a 15-second delay. So you push the first one, wait, second one, wait, third one, you wait. And then it'll hopefully have time for the security people to go outside and, you know, put their hands on you. I'm sorry, Lori, do you have a question? Am I going to?
Yeah, no, I was thinking that I know it, but I think it'd be helpful for others. One, to talk about the unique way you're getting them out of going to jail, that you're going to be a bail bondsman. That's one.
Oh,
And
yes.
two, about everyone's going to do the workday model, and they have that at Fountain House, and they have that here at Community 43. But will you have paid staff like a chef? Will you have a cleaning service so someone can model and make sure that food isn't growing bacteria or there's not roaches and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're licensed by the OMH. So let me talk the bond. I was just going to tell you about that, that piece of the security. So to put your hands on someone, that's not a regular necessarily security staff person. As a condition of you coming to Hope House, you have to request of the judge to set voluntary bail. So bail is not necessarily always a bad thing. As a judge, if someone asks me to set bail, that happens sometimes. They'll say, Judge, give me $1, set $1 bail on me. And I will do that because they actually want to stay in jail and do what they call clocking local time so that they can be then sentenced to time served rather than going to state prison. So the same kind of thing will happen here. We'll say, as a condition of going to Hope House, you know, client, you have to ask the judge to set bail. The judge will then set bail and a bond agent will then post that bail. The significance here is that a licensed bond agent in New York can put their hands on you and take you back to court if you threaten the terms of the release that you've been, you know, required to do, the terms of the release. So if the judge says to you, you got to go to Hope House, you got to play by the rules, you got to finish the program, those are the terms of my release, and I'm setting bail on you as a condition of your release. So if you're leaving Hope House and you're not supposed to be, we can, instead of calling the police or going back to the court and getting a bench warrant, we can immediately say, you know, unfortunately, Joe just left, bond agent, can you please go get him? And our bond agents won't be, you know, like the Hulk. They'll be people that are trained, CIT trained, they'll understand the job, and they will go out and get, hope is, Joe, before Joe gets into any trouble, and bring them, Joe, back to the court. So that's a unique feature. I won't be doing it actually. Because now as a judge, I can't be a bond agent as well. So, but we will contract with a bond agent company to do that work. The other thing that they're going to have to do is have a bracelet on. We're working with a company that has new technology, very small bracelets, but that's an extra level because we can't have a hard lock door because of the inmate exclusion rule, the Medicaid rule. So they'll have multiple layers of security, the delayed doors, the security 24 hours a day, the bond agent backup, and the bracelet. Those things we hope will give DAs and judges enough confidence. In addition, they really won't be able to come and go without a peer for a while. So that's the security piece of it. In terms of the work order day, yes, we're going to have a chef and an assistant. Then that's all required pursuant to our OMH license that we'll get. We're going to get what's called basically a congregate care license, which is critical because that gives you Medicaid. An OMH license equals Medicaid. And it equals about half of our budget. And the significance here for people who are kind of into this is right now, because of the way Medicaid works in every state, if, as I said before, a person goes into jail or prison, their Medicaid turns off, which means someone's still paying for that care. States, counties are paying for that care. States on the prison level and on the local level, it's usually counties or cities for the jail. But the federal government isn't. So if we can, as we've done, if we can find a way to get people out of those places, jails and prisons, and get the Medicaid turned on, then the federal government is a partner. They are paying for, in our case, as I said, half of the cost of the treatment per year. The other half will come from state, and in our case, New York City. Question? Holly?
Yeah, I can't turn on my raise my hand button.
That's
So
okay.
I'm just raising my hand.
Yeah.
A couple of questions. When you say an OMH license, is that enabling you to bill Medicaid for
Yes.
clinic services, outpatient clinic services?
No.
Like therapy, like counseling, like
No.
life skills?
No. So that gets paid by Medicaid through the CDTP license. So there's two licenses involved with Hope House. One is the residential license. It's a continuing day, it's a congregate care residential, what's called a 595 license, and it gives you
Right.
Medicaid for the residential services. The treatment, I mean, in New York, you can't technically call a CDTP a clinic license anyway.
Got it.
But the point is that gives you Medicaid for that kind of treatment. Yes.
Got it. Okay,
So-
perfect. And then is there a limit, or is there a group of felonies that are eligible for placement in Hope House? And I mean, I'm assuming second-degree murder is not, you're not going to be eligible even if you're SMI, or can you?
Well, we're going to take it on a case-by-case basis. I mean, there are people, for example, I know a judge in Brooklyn, a mental health court judge in Brooklyn, who took a mother who was convicted or who was charged with murdering her child. It was a postpartum depression situation. She had just given birth, and she murdered her baby. But because of the significant depression, he did take her. The DA allowed it. So I'm not going to say never. In terms of, are there any charges that we are going to exclude? Yes. People accused of sex offenses. And I have to say, I think that that's a very complicated topic. And we're doing a whole program at the Greenberger Center on, it's called From Sexual Health to Sexual Harm. And it's about sex offenses and all the things that we do, I think, wrongly. But the community board in this case asked us for two things. We went to the community board. That was the fastest part of this whole thing. It took us 8 months and they gave us approval. It's like, and I was a land use lawyer, so I thought we're never going to get this through. Like, who wants this population in their neighborhood? But 8 months, they were fantastic. We went to them and we said, if you don't want us here, we'll leave. But here's what we want to do. They said, let's talk about it, because we have the highest incarceration rate of any borough. And they said, after they listened, that we want two things. One, no sex people charged with sex offenses, because at that time it was next door to an after-school day program. Two, we want 4 beds reserved from people from the Bronx. They're my heroes in this whole story. They are my heroes. They accepted this and made very reasonable requests. And I said, absolutely.
Jim has a question.
Yeah, Cheryl, I wasn't clear about how the person gets into this program. Is it a pre-adjudication? Is there an adjudication of guilt that is made before they enter into the program, or is it pre-adjudication?
Yeah. It's a voluntary plea agreement that is mandated. So they're mandated to go as part of the plea agreement. They do plead guilty, probably to a felony, with the understanding, the DA has to agree, or we won't take them, that if the person completes successfully, then the prosecution will withdraw the charge and substitute it with a lower charge, which will not require incarceration.
So they plead guilty, but an adjudication of guilt is not made. Is that correct?
Well, I think they will say, I'm pleading guilty to a felony. They are pleading as part of, but there's an understanding that the sentence will be delayed. And I actually went before the New York State Sentencing Commission about this. We don't have one anymore, but it was still in effect when we first started this. And I was really thrilled that the Sentencing Commission felt that this mechanism would work. You can plead guilty to the charge, but then you get, I think they call it repleader, but you are allowed to withdraw the charge. the DA agrees to withdraw the charge and substitute for a lower charge. And then you get basically sentenced on the lower charge. I think you probably get arraigned on the lower charge and then you get sentenced. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we are doing that here in America. We just started it, and I'm still we've done it successfully, and I'm still not sure, Jim, whether it's a pre-adjudication or an adjudication, but we call it delay and dismiss. The judge offered it, and I said, okay, yeah, that sounds good. And I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about, but it made sense. So
the judge doesn't enter an actual adjudication.
You do a change of plea. You do a change of plea proceeding. You enter the plea. The judge delays sentencing.
So does he accept the plea?
He accepts the plea, and then he delays sentencing.
Yeah,
that's the delay. And then Michael just had a guy finish, and they went back and they dismissed the case. Okay. And so it's a legal fiction, it seems to me.
I guess technically the adjudication of guilt is not made until the sentencing date.
Right.
So
that's right. That's right. That's right.
And I didn't know we were doing it, but I was like, oh, of course, that we'd like to discuss that.
Whatever works.
Yeah.
Delay. Yes.
Another question. Will you utilized, I'm not sure what word you use in New York. It's probably not this. Forced medication or court-ordered medication for those that need it but don't always want to take their medication?
That's a good question. I would think that the way it would play out is that if the psychiatrist, and we will have a psychiatrist, on the team and a nurse practitioner, if they say, Joe, you really need to, have this or that, and they say, I'm not doing that, then at some point, I guess we come back to the judge and say, Judge, this is, the psychiatrist is saying this or that. And, at that point, I don't know if you'd call it forced or not, but they'd have to make a decision, but we aren't, if you mean, are we going to hold them down and stick a needle in them? No, I don't think we would get to that point, because it's not civil commitment. It's a voluntary, that's a very big part of the whole Medicaid puzzle too. We cannot say that nothing can be against your will. So I guess as I'm kind of speaking out loud here and thinking through this, I would have to say, no, we can suggest if you don't do this, but we can't, Yeah,
but Cheryl, it would seem to me pretty obvious, actually. I would be surprised that the judge in the initial deal that he's presenting, that this felon has to accept, that he does not include that you will accept whatever medications your psychiatrist or your team recommend that you do. I'd be really surprised he doesn't include that in the original deal. And if you don't take the medications, then you're not abiding by the deal. That would be a really silly thing to leave out of that.
No, exactly right. It's going to be in there. It's just, what do you do when the person says, I'm not doing this? They get there, they're there for 8 months, and you say, I'm not doing this. There's two choices. You could, I guess, either, stick the needle in or force them, which we can't do. Or you can say, okay, you're going back to the judge. And if the judge and you can't come to terms, if the judge says, sorry, but the doctors say you need this medication, you're not agreeing to it, you're going to prison. That's the solution. Not we're going to force. Yeah, we're not going to force. What
I'm saying is that should be in the initial deal. It shouldn't.
It is.
Okay.
No, that is. But I think Lori's question was, will you force medication? And I'm just trying to suggest that, in a sense, it's certainly. I hate to say that we're leveraging, but you do. You're kind of saying, look, do this, or you're going to go to prison. But that's different than, I'm going to force medication down your throat.
In Arizona, we have the court-ordered treatment orders in Arizona. The COT orders don't say what treatment. It says you're court-ordered for treatment at ABC Clinic. So if ABC Clinic treatment can be show up once a month for an appointment. that may be what your provider orders, or it can be an injectable antipsychotic, or it can be an oral antipsychotic. So that's where it gets dicey when somebody is, well, I'll agree with this part of the treatment, but I'm not going to take the injectable. So yeah, in here we can take them to the hospital and forcibly medicate. You don't do that.
And I can tell you, it happens in my mental health court now, even at the misdemeanor level. I have people that are supposed to be going to whatever therapy twice a month. They're taking medications, and and they don't. And we have to have kind of a moment where, look, you're either going to do this, or I'm going to put you on the criminal docket. And just last week, there was a woman who, she is not complying. She's not doing what she says she's doing. And last week she took a broom handle and she beat the hell out of an old woman on the street because she was out of her mind again. And so I've said to her, now, this is the 4th or 5th time we've tried this. You are now off my mental health docket and you're on the criminal docket. I mean, that's it. At some point, some people, I can't have that. I can't have someone beating up an old lady on the street with a broom handle. Which happens.
But by the way, Holly, on a COT order, the only thing we can do is, if someone's not taking their medication, is go back and amend the COT.
Right.
There
Absolutely.
to get actually forced medications, that's a whole other ballgame.
That's another proceeding, but it opens up that possibility.
It does. It does.
Yeah, and that's not the case in many states.
No. No,
And
we
I
have.
think it's a
have many
strength in
people-
Arizona. It's an important. It's dicey and it's uncomfortable to think about, but I think it is a feature of our system that is different than other states, which is why I mention it.
Yeah, we have a lot of people that have been amended 6, 7, 8 times.
Right. And I will say, I have a couple of clients in COPA's system now, Dr. Mike, and I have been so impressed with a couple of your providers, nurse practitioners. Mohammed is one, I'll just say his first name.
Yeah, I know.
They are superb at negotiating and trying to de-escalate a refusal to comply. And Cheryl, as you were talking about, it's almost CIT, but at an intellectual level, right? I mean, they are really good at working with these people and figuring out a way. Well, let's just do this, and then let's do that. I've been so impressed with that particular provider.
Yeah, there are a lot of coaxing going on there for sure.
So I just wanted to respond to Miriam's comment. Miriam, just so you know, we anticipate that probably we have 16 beds. I would say virtually every bed will be filled with someone who is of color and on Medicaid. So that's the population that's in Rikers, unfortunately, and it's a very valid point. And for people who maybe aren't looking at the chat, Miriam says that it feels like it's a very privileged. It says, did you all read it? Have you all read that, or should I read it out loud?
Yes. Go ahead and read it for those on their cell phones that can't see it.
Miriam says it feels very privileged, and I'm not sure how I feel because these services should be for everyone. Jails and docks are full of mental health patients. This feels very white and moneyed, like rich people diversion. I'm feeling like we need to focus on bringing these services to everyone. I'm sorry, I'm uncomfortable. They often charge poor people of color sex offender charges that really are not. It feels separatist. So I'm sorry you're feeling uncomfortable, Miriam. Absolutely, I think you have some. Absolutely, I mean, unfortunately, the whole criminal justice system is very racist, and the sex offense. Absolutely. And we have a whole 8-part series. We talked about, a whole program on how Black bodies are sexualized differently than white bodies. From kindergarten, Black women, Black little girls, little kindergartners are sexualized in a way that results in them being expelled from school at much higher rates than boys. Black or white boys. It's really something to be very aware of, and I'm glad you're bringing it up. We, you know, the thing about Francis Greenberger is that he could have, I guess, put this facility up 10 years ago and just had it for,
Private.
you know,
Yeah.
for private people. But we didn't want to do that. We didn't want this to be a vanity project. We wanted to just beat the heck out of the system and force it to be able to use Medicaid, because the people that are on Medicaid are poor, and a lot in the criminal justice system are people of color. And we wanted this system to be bent in a way that we could replicate this and we could make this available to people in the criminal justice system who really need it. Because what Francis found when he watched his son go through, when he'd go to Rikers on that bus all the time every week, is that the system is racist. The system was, he just had no idea about the system. And frankly, you know, I'm not sure I did either. I didn't have the knowledge, firsthand knowledge I do now about it. So we're very aware of this issue. And like I said, that's why we wanted this to apply to Medicaid eligible people.
Yeah.
It wasn't good enough to have a vanity project.
So I know, Cheryl, it's like the DMZ. It's a real eye opener for parents that end up having children and systems like that. I'm sure that Francis, with all of his knowledge and wealth, and he ran a hedge fund, he too had to take the bus and had to go through the protocol to go through the visitation to see his son and go through visits. And I know when we spoke at lunch with him, he just never wanted anyone to have to go through that again. Any person with serious mental illness be incarcerated because of a delusion that they have. And, you know, his son actually, like Cheryl said, called for help, right? And called to try to get help before his offense occurred.
Yeah, he did. But yeah, it's and for anyone who's interested in this issue, I would recommend there are 2 books if you're interested in learning about the racism in the criminal justice system and the country. Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow is an excellent book, and so is Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. Excellent books that, if you want to get a sense of this issue quickly and very powerfully, I would suggest reading those books.
And if you're particularly interested in Arizona, there is an excellent town hall publication about criminal justice, our criminal justice system and sentencing from 3 years ago. Cheryl, I'll try to get it and send it to you.
Yep.
It's an excellent study. And I just want to thank the person who spoke for mentioning disparities in by race in the criminal justice system. It is astonishing when you look around the country. In the area of sex offenders, it's particularly interesting. I don't do many of those cases anymore, but my colleague Michael Deeney is has one of the largest practices in the Southwest in that area. And it's about 75% of if you look at the sex offender registries, if you're looking at child pornography and internet crime, which is increasingly prevalent, it's almost 70% are white. And it's often prosecuted in the federal system. But if you're looking at sex assault, sex offense, rape, sex assault, sex abuse, rape, much higher percentage of African Americans. And in right now, full 1% of the African American population in this country, male, is on a sex offender registry, which is astonishing. But the most common demographic for rape is American Indians. So it's a fascinating area. And it's an area that I think we have to be sure when we look at programs that we're building in ways to identify bias. But it's a fascinating and sad area. I'm glad somebody mentioned it.
Yeah, in Arizona, there's an opportunity right now. Access is looking at getting NCQA accreditation in
Yeah.
health equity, right?
Yes, yes.
So approaching them on this issue, particularly related to inmates, might be a very opportune time to get their buy-in on that.
I'd love to talk to you, Dr. Mike. I know there are lots of people lots of lawyers, but I've also had conversations with several, 3 judges specifically, who, when they're all younger women who went on the bench, and after 4 or 5 months, they were noticing the demographics of folks coming in the courtroom. So that would be fascinating. I will follow up with you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'd love to see that if you could send that out, Mike. And so Cheryl, I know for years now, some of the issues that you had was with some of the state medical boards, the licensing, they were giving you a lot of problems. They were blocking permits. They were against the whole idea of secure of any kind.
Yeah, and let me just answer quickly. Yes, men and women. Well, 8 men and 8 women. To answer Chuck's question. And yes, what I noticed was when we had a change in governor from Governor Cuomo to Governor Hochul, there was a sea change. Just utter sea change. Governor Hochul, Kathy Hochul, has personal experience. I think a nephew died overdose. And so she gets this issue. She actually, when she was lieutenant governor, came to us. She's a colleague or whatever of Francis's. They had known each other, and he kept in contact with her as a lieutenant governor even. And she was totally supportive of Hope House. And I can't emphasize enough how I think if that change hadn't happened, I think we'd still be struggling to get Hope House off the ground. She really made it happen.
It'll be interesting, and I will make sure I invite you to the San Mateo Secure, because they're going to do civil. They don't call them civil commitments like ours. They call them conservatorships and other things. But that will be a very interesting one, because it'll be the first one on kind of the civil population, which was what our first attempt here in Arizona is going to be. Any other questions for Cheryl? Because I know you're in New York and it's late and you're not even home yet.
Well,
Jill has a question. You're on mute. Okay.
So this is such a need. Have you had people from other states, besides Lori and Charles and, Acme, asking for advice about how to start it in their state? There is such a need for this.
Interesting that you asked the question. For the short answer is not a lot. Connecticut has, but I was on a call today with my colleague at John Jay College, a criminal justice college in New York City, and they have a whole department that studies alternatives to incarceration and similar programs to see, do they work or not? What works, what doesn't? So I don't know what the name of the department is, some research, whatever. But we're going to work with John Jay College to do 2 things. One, not only have them study if this works over a 6-year period. We'll have 3 cohorts because the length of stay is 1 to 2 years. We hope to get, 3 cohorts going through over the 6-year period. But also they are very interested in working with us now in the next 2 years as we build Hope House. We're breaking ground next week. It's going to take about 18 months to build. As we build, and also more importantly, hire the staff, do all the steps we have to do to stand this program up. They want to work with us so that they can document, suggest, and figure out a protocol essentially so that other states, other places can do what we're about to do, stand up this program now that we have the bones in place so that people don't have to reinvent the wheel. So, I have no idea what we're in for the next 2 years and actually getting this thing off the ground in terms of operationalizing it. I fortunately hired someone just a few months ago full-time, and he's our going to be our managing director of operations, or is our managing director of operations, and his job is to stand up Hope House. His primary job is to stand up Hope House in the next 2 years and do all that stuff that he's going to need to do. And we're going to have help from John Jay College. So hopefully we'll.
It's throughout the country. It's just, I mean, I'm sure we've all read articles how people have these serious mental illnesses and they go to jail. They just go to jail. Imagine it, people with Alzheimer's or, you know, other brain illnesses, do they get sent to jail?
They do
Sometimes.
actually increasingly. We're actually going to do a program. We're continuing our from sexual health to sexual harm. And one of the programs we're going to do is on dementia. There's a type of frontal lobe dementia that the doctors know, I'm going to do this wrong, say this wrong, but it actually affects the part of your brain that has to do with empathy. And it actually, it's called.
It's a French one. It's something Pons, right? Something.
I just know it's deep.
Yeah.
It's some kind of frontal something dementia. And it basically causes kind of late onset sexual crimes, basically. And, you know, I've heard of many stories now where, you know, grandfathers are molesting grandchildren because it turns out they have this particular kind of dementia where they lose their filters. They don't understand. They lose their empathy, and there's this kind of connection with they lose their inhibitions about sex. And so they are going to jail and prison. And we're going to do a program about that. Just, you know, and they're also, we've done programs on people with autism spectrum disorder who don't get the grace. They don't understand, and they end up incarcerated for sexual, you know, crimes, and they don't get sex education either. So anyway, yes, that's a big issue. And
it sounds criminal to me, actually, putting ill people, you know, yeah, anyhow.
It absolutely results in criminal activity. The question is why, and more
No,
importantly,
I mean, putting them in jail to me sounds.
oh, I see.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it results in criminal activity, but we need to figure out a way to prevent it and to do something different than incarcerate them if that happens. I think they need treatment. And there's a huge, as the population ages in jail and prison, mostly prisons, they have a huge problem in New York and across the country in people who are increasingly getting dementia and other illnesses, Alzheimer's, where they're incarcerated. You know, the jails and prisons, mostly prisons at that point, prisons are for longer term sentences.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they can't deal with it. They're not designed to deal with those serious physical issues.
Well, I think that's kind of a result of incarcerating large numbers of the population for long periods of time. They are the biggest provider of behavioral health services and psychiatric meds. Now they're probably going to be the biggest geriatric providers, right? Of having to.
You are right.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's mass incarceration.
Particularly in Arizona and Florida, which have the longest sentences per capita, and an aging population. I texted my colleague who, as I said, does a lot of sex offender cases. And what you're talking about is behavioral variant frontotemporal dementia, BVFTD.
Yes. And I have an article somewhere on my desk about it. Yes.
And we allegedly have 3 cases and an excellent expert out of Chicago. So I don't know.
Oh, well, would you share that with me? I'd love to hear the expert.
I will.
The other thing we're doing a program on borderline personality disorder and sexual behavior. I have an article right here about it, because that also leads to, you know, incarceration. Anyway, but we could go on. We could go on all night. I'm sure you have other things you need to talk about, but thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it. And thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'll keep you.
And thank you, Dr. Mike, as always.
On the invitation list for the upcoming ones on Secure.
Please. Okay. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you. So I'll stop the recording. This portion of the meeting